So one thing to remember when you're building your LS swap is that you need to make sure you have a steam line going from the top of the cylinder heads to your radiator. So the steam line is going to hook up from there, and that's because this is the high point of the engine because the thermostat's all the way down here. So air can get trapped in there. You need to make sure it has a way to get back to your radiator. A couple different ways you can do that. You can buy a brand new radiator that has a little port on it for a steam line. What I've done on the S10, and seemed to work pretty well there, is I drilled a hole in the top of the radiator, and what I'm going to do is get this bulkhead fitting, put some RTV on it, stick it right there like that. Now that's a way for the steam line to get up. I don't need to try to tap into the radiator line that's coming into this part. They sell adapters to do that. I'm just not a big fan of them. I like this better. So I got my hole drilled there, and now I just need to RTV this and stick the nut on the back side. All right, plenty of RTV there, just enough to make a big mess. I got my nut. I'm just gonna stick the nut in from this underside. This bulkhead, This bulkhead does come with some nylon washers. I'm not gonna use those. You wanna try to avoid what I just did and drop your nut in the top of your radiator. When you are drilling your hole, you just want to make sure that you get all those little chips out from drilling. All right, nuts lined up. So what I'm installing right now is a Power Master starter I got from Summit. So this is the same starter I have in the S10. I like it. It's small. I think it's classified as technically a mini starter. It's adjustable, so it's got all these holes in it, so you can actually clock the starter in whatever way you need it to make it work best for your application. And actually I've already done that. I had to adjust the starter a bit because the solenoid on the top was hitting one of the sensors on the engine. So just clocked it a little bit, so now it's pointing out just a bit, gives me the clearance I need next to the engine block. So now we'll get this up in here and measure my clearances. need to know my clearance between the gear, the starter gear and the ring gear. A little tip: if you don't have a thread feeler or a rod feeler like I do, I don't have one. So actually, your zip tie is about 40 thousandths, about 30 to 40 thousandths. So if you can just stick the end of the zip tie in between, and if it's a really snug fit, you're pretty good on your clearance. So that is a snug fit. So I'd say we're good on our clearance. So now that the starter is in, I can now run my transcore lines. So that was the biggest thing I was waiting for before I ran my transcore lines is starter, because the lines I think are going to come out here, they're going to come over, and I'm going to bring them out. They're going to run down underneath the starter, and then I'm going to kick them up so they run in between here, kind of hugging the block, and then over to the radiator. So time to get on that. So if you ever had to bend up flares on the end of a brake line or transmission line, you know that some of the tools out there just don't work at all. And you can get some really bad flares which don't allow you to have a good seal against your fitting. I've used some other tools, but this is by far my favorite tool to use. It's made by a bunch of different companies, Summit, Eastwood. This particular one is from Summit. And it creates perfect flares on the end of your tubing, whatever kind of tubing you have. And what's nice about this system is that it can do 90-degree flares and also 45-degree flares. So what I'm doing here is 45-degree flares because I have a 45-degree nut. So the first thing you need to do is you just need to set your tube in between the two dies here. One downside to this type of tool, I think it's the only downside, is you need to have enough length for the die and the nut on the back side. But once you have that in there, you can snug her up, and then you go to operation 0, which just makes sure that the tubing is flat with the end of the die. You can crank down on your die then. Just double check. And then you want to go to operation 1. I'm using 5/16 tubing. So operation 1, 5/16 tubing. Clamp down on it. It does the prep step for making the flare, mushrooming over the end. And then you go to operation 2. And that finishes the flare. So now we can loosen this up, pull it out, take our die off. So here you can see it's got the 45-degree and the 90-degree ends of the die. And this is the end we just made, and it makes a perfect flare for your nut to go against. So a little helpful tip if you're have to do a lot of these, but this is my opinion is by far the best tool. So on the bottom we have the old transmission coil lines that came out, and on the top are the new ones that I made. A little bit of difference, I'd say, but well worth the time, as these are neater and I think they're going to fit better, and also no joint. I definitely don't want to put something out there that has a joint in the coil lines. That's just not good. So time to get them in. Luckily it's not too difficult to do that. Alright, so that's the cooling system pretty much all wrapped up. Radiator is in place. I've got my top radiator hose installed. I have my heater core bypass line installed. Right now this truck doesn't have a heater core. I've got my trans core lines installed way down there. You can see them. I've got my fan installed. This fan is just a 16-inch fan from Summit Racing, reversible. I wanted to run a stock fan on this, mechanical fan, but unfortunately there just wasn't enough space between the snout and the radiator, and then where the engine is positioned in relation to the radiator, the fan would have actually ended up hitting the trans core lines down here and this lower radiator output. So I had to go with the electric fan. Not a huge deal. Clearance is a little tight, but I do have just enough where if the engine torques over, it won't be hitting the fan here. I got my steam line installed in the radiator, and the last thing I need to do is I just need to install the lower radiator hose. Just haven't done that yet because I need bigger hose clamps, and I need a slightly longer hose. So that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw today, please feel free to like and subscribe below. Always happy to hear what comments you guys have, and I'll see you next time.